Alrighty, so welcome back from lunch to our camp participants, and welcome to everyone who is now joining us. For our attendees, if you're unaware, we currently have an ongoing camp running called the Cerebral Cortex Camp, and this speaker panel is part of it. So today's panel will consist of undergraduate students studying in neuroscience and related fields. We also have a series of questions prepared that were sent in by attendees, and we'll have a Q&A session at the end for more questions. But before we get into it, we'll go over some rules and expectations that we expect everyone to follow. So like we said earlier, because this is recorded, please keep your audio and video off. Be respectful to our speakers and participants. Please hold your questions until the Q&A portion, and during the Q&A portion, you may ask your questions via chat, and please don't unmute yourself.
So the purpose of this panel discussion today is to kind of highlight the interdisciplinary nature of neuroscience. So there's many different fields to which it relates. We have a lot of different, we have 6 different panelists today, and they're all studying very different majors. And neuroscience still finds a way to kind of fit into all of their courses of study. And so we want you to be able to learn from current undergraduate students about the different educational pathways you can pursue in post-secondary if you do have an interest in neuroscience or psychology or another related field. Okay, so like I mentioned, we have 6 panelists. They're all here today, excuse me, and I'm going to give them a chance to introduce themselves so you get to know a little bit more about them before we start having them answer questions. So Priyanshu, do you want to start?
Yeah, sure. Thank you. Hi, guys. I'm Priyanshu. I go to the University of British Columbia here in Canada, BC, and I'm studying a bachelor's in science in integrated sciences. It's basically a major where I get to pick and choose from different majors and create my own integration, and it's a very interdisciplinary field, and I basically focus on neurobiology.
Hi, everybody. My name is Michelle Alice. I'm a junior in University of Illinois here in Chicago, and I study biomedical engineering, neuroengineering, and my research is computer science, bioelectric interfaces to create neuroprosthetics, and I specialize in user interfaces.
Hi, everyone. I'm Vanessa, and I've just finished my undergraduate degree in neuroscience, and I go to the University of Bristol in the UK. I'm now on an internship, and I'm going to be starting a master's in neuroimaging next year.
Hi, my name is Mahiya, and I'm at Western University. So I'm currently doing my Bachelor of Science with an honor specialization in psychology, and I'm focusing on the relationships between the brain and neuropsychological functioning. So I'm also working as a researcher, and my research is focused in psychosocial oncology. So again, that really relates the biological aspects of the brain and how it relates to mental states, quality of life, and all of that. And I'm very excited to be speaking with you all today.
Hi, everyone. My name is Chinmayi. I'm a third-year undergrad student at Columbia University in New York City, where I'm studying a combination of neuroscience and medical humanities. Medical humanities, for context, the easiest way to think about it is thinking about medicine beyond the biological aspect and connecting economic, social, cultural, and linguistic lenses together to better understand how we view medicine and its implications on society. And my research interests fall into cognitive neuroscience with a bit of memory and attention, as well as traumatic brain injury, specifically looking into populations in clinical settings.
Hi everyone, I'm Jhillika Trisal. I am a junior majoring in biotechnology from Schulen University in India, and I am intending to minor in economics. So my research interests include developmental neuroscience, stem cells, and right now I am engaged in understanding the neural circuits that underlie social recognition, and I'm super excited to talk to you guys today.
Okay, awesome. So those are our 6 panelists. We are now ready to kind of get into some of the questions that you submitted to us and that we gauged your interest in. So without further ado, let's get started.
Alrighty, so Priyanshu, if you don't mind, you can start us off by answering the first question, and feel free to popcorn over to another speaker afterwards. So the first question is, what inspired your interest in neuroscience?
Sure. So a lot of my interest in neuroscience was actually founded off of philosophy. Philosophy has a lot of questions pertaining to the brain, especially consciousness. And my interest in neuroscience primarily started from like wanting to understand what consciousness is and the way it works. And then over time, I realized that consciousness might be more of like a biological thing. And the more I explored it, the more I found that like, the brain is at the center of a lot of the way we think. And then I slowly started developing more. And I'm like, wait a second, there's more cool things. Like the body also has interplays with the brain. The brain works like in tandem with all these extra like stimuli. And like I started exploring it that way. And I found that actually I'm not that interested in philosophy. I'm actually more interested in neuroscience. And yeah, this happened in like, I think elementary. And then after that, I just started like went forth into neuroscience.
And how about Michelle Alice? Would you like to also answer this question?
Yes. So kind of a little funny here. I got really interested as a kid when I see a lot of sci-fi movies, especially like technology that hasn't really existed yet, especially with all the doctor types movies. And so I was like, wow, let me see if I can make something. And I always tinker with like little things as a kid. And then I'm here.
That's really interesting. I think a lot of us can relate to that when we're watching stuff when we're younger and we're just like super fascinated by what we see. And because of that, that kind of sparks a huge interest for us that we unknowingly get ourselves into when we're in college. Next, how about Vanessa?
Sure. So I first got into neuroscience when I was in secondary school. And I went to Oxford University and participated in someone's psychology experiment. So I was all wired up and they were looking at my brain and brain signaling. And I'm not entirely sure what they were even doing, but I just knew that I really wanted to know and I got this curiosity for the brain. So I went back home and I watched a TV series by David Eagleman. It was just 6 episodes all about the brain and I just loved it. And so I emailed my school and was like, I want to change my A levels. So I went and did biology. And then in biology, the bit that I really loved was the brain. And that's how I got into neuroscience.
Great. How about Chinmayi?
Yeah, so I remember when I was in middle school, I was at a science fair. I did not really think too much about neuroscience and field at that point, but I really liked anatomy. And I came across this squishy brain model, the ones that you can take apart and play around with. So me being another 12, 13-year-old I took it apart. And then I had this epiphany that I didn't know how to put it back together and sort of had a mind-blowing, pun intended, moment where I was like, there's a lot more to the brain than I realized. So kind of just spiraled into an interest in neurobiology, kind of in line with Vanessa's story with the biology route. Ironically, I'm not too involved in the neurobio realm anymore, but I think that just got me started in thinking about there's so many fields that neuroscience, just a basic knowledge in, could open the door to. And that has kind of led to the different interests that I have today and hopefully continue to evolve.
Wonderful. And how about we jump to Mahiya?
Hi, yeah. So I feel I've always had an interest in understanding why we are the way that we are as people, what makes us human, and the mind, the brain. It's such an intricate organ that really governs our entire reality, our perceptions. And so all of that was very intriguing to me. And that's kind of how I really got into neuroscience and psychology, basically just focusing on the neural and biological aspects of mental processes and our brain and how that actually comes into our behavioral manifestations and how we act the way that we do. So all of that all together, and there's still so much to always learn in this field. And yeah, that kind of inspired my interest in neuroscience and has been carrying it ever since.
Great. And finally, let's hear from Jhillika.
So my motivation towards neuroscience has been, I've always been very fascinated by exploring the unknown. The brain is the most complex organ. It makes us who we are. And the thrill of exploring the unknown gives me that dopamine rush. I'll be very honest. And I don't want to lose that in life. I want to make it a career. I want to live for it every day. So as we say, all we know is infinitely less than what all remains unknown. That sense of accomplishment that we get by creating new knowledge, discovering parts of our existence. That's what really makes me go towards neuroscience. I mean, this brain is so beautiful. It helps you to do the simplest of tasks, like picking up this glass, and thinking of like the craziest startup ideas, going on Mars, thinking of like the most revolutionary treatments and everything. I mean, it's so beautiful, isn't it? And also, I loved science as a kid. I was a very lost kid. I never liked any of the classes, but science classes were like, I actually listened to them. And yeah, on a serious note, then also I've been, my grandmother has Alzheimer's disease. So, that really, that really strengthened my passion to know more about this brain and what possibly went wrong with her, which actually made us all realize that, this brain, like it can take you, like, it's like black and white. It can take you anywhere. I mean, you know, this brain is just so vast. And I want to spend my life knowing it. I will fail, I know, I'll make mistakes, I'll have challenges, but honestly, it's all worth it.
That's a great attitude, Jhillika. Thank you for that. We're going to move on to our next question now, which is about neuroscience or psychology courses in high school. It looks like a lot of us here discovered at a very young age that this is something that you were interested in. Vanessa, you mentioned changing some of your courses when you realized that you had an interest in neuroscience or psychology. So do you want to start by answering this?
Yeah, sure. So it's a bit different here in England, but we go from GCSEs, where you take most subjects, to A levels, where you take 4. And initially I was just doing maths and chemistry, and I wanted to do actually French. But then after I'd taken part in this experiment, I decided I wanted to learn more about the brain. So I switched French to biology. And to be honest, I didn't like much of biology. I just loved the brain. So I just pursued that, yeah, but we didn't have the option of neuroscience specifically or psychology specifically at my school. So biology was as close as I could get. And there wasn't much neuroscience in that either. I just kind of learned more of it from outside knowledge and reading books and watching TV shows and like talking and networking with people. So yeah, you don't need to have psychology or neuroscience at all to pursue it. You can just use what you have.
Yeah, definitely. And I think I can relate. I think I don't like many areas of biology that don't necessarily pertain to the brain. But Chinmayi, you mentioned that you're not very involved in the neurobiology side of things anymore. Did you have the chance to take any of those courses in high school?
In high school, I would say mostly fell into either AP Biology or AP Psychology, Advanced Placement. And I would say definitely very limited, right? In the scope of you have this curriculum, sure you take the AP exam, but I definitely got to explore more of that breadth in coursework and not just kind of, here's the Neuro 101, you're spoon-fed this content, and that's it, we're gonna call it a day. That only came later in undergrad, I would say. And that's kind of when you have the chance to, even in courses that are just basic writing courses, to explore a topic in neuroscience and write essays of your own. It's much more flexible than in high school, I would say.
And Jhillika, you also mentioned that you didn't pay much attention to many of your classes that weren't science classes. So which ones were they that really piqued your interest?
Okay, so I'm particularly, I love biology, unlike my fellow panelists. I am in love with each and every aspect of that subject. So yeah, I'm more of a neurobiology person over here, but yeah, I did take a psychology course as my optional subject in grades 11th and 12th, which actually I was more inclined towards studying about mental health. So this psychology course, I enjoyed the course, really, I really enjoyed it. And yeah, for neuroscience, neuroscience was only a biology chapter in our textbook. That's it. That was the total biology neuroscience exposure I had in biology. But yeah, it was good enough for me to start somewhere, you know. And then there's some beautiful Coursera courses. The very first course I started off with was by Dr. Peggy Mason on Coursera, the Neurobiology of Everyday Life. I mean, it's a very easy to understand course, and I'd recommend every neuroscience enthusiast to take it up. I mean, that course is phenomenal. You must take it up if you don't have that sort of substantial exposure to neuroscience. And yeah, psychology too. It's just beautiful.
Yeah.
I mean,
so obviously, oh, go ahead.
Yeah, that's it.
Okay. Thanks, Jhillika. Yeah, I was just going to say that it seems like you don't necessarily need to be able to, you don't have to necessarily take courses that are offered just by your school. There's a plethora of other online resources out there like Coursera courses for those of you who are unable to take neuroscience or psychology courses in high school. Michelle, did your high school have any sci-fi courses, or how did you kind of pursue your interest in high school?
So I didn't take any psychology, or there wasn't any neuroscience classes in my school when I was younger. What I did was I went into robotic classes or mechanical classes, a lot of physics, a lot of math classes, and then I would do clubs related to like making things. So computer science, making games, or web development. So I was trying to lean into biomechanical stuff that I would like to do, so that I could easily have experience when I apply to university, like say, hey, I have experience in this and this, and I'd like to do a lot more neuroscience.
What about you, Mahiya?
Yeah, so I actually didn't get the chance to explore too many psychology or neuroscience courses in high school. I was in the IB program, International Baccalaureate. I hope I pronounced that correctly. I still can't get it. But at my high school, they kind of had pre-designated streams. So there was the life sciences stream, there was the engineering theme, there was the business stream, and the courses were predetermined as well. So I had the option to take one elective, and I did take the psychology elective. I thought the course was a really great introduction to the subject, and it really strengthened a lot of my interests and beliefs that I already had. And oh, by the way, I did take the life sciences course in high school, and similar to some of our other panelists, I really was mostly just interested in the brain. And in psychology, I found biology overall very interesting, but yeah, it would have been cool to take more psychology related courses there as well.
And so finally, Priyanshu, what about you? Did you get a chance to take any neuroscience or psychology courses in high school?
Yeah, for me, my high school actually never really offered neuroscience, and like I couldn't take the psychology course because it conflicted with my schedule. So in high school, I never actually got an opportunity. What I did instead was that I had that chance, like I knew I was interested in neuroscience like coming into university. The only time I actually came across neuroscience was in my biology textbook, and we never really covered that chapter. So what I did instead was I took the chapter up, I started reading it myself, and I talked to my teacher about it. And it turned out my teacher actually had plenty of experience in neuroscience. So I started talking to him. I got like some recommendations for some papers to read, and I kind of started reading like academic papers then and kind of taking that approach. That helped me learn a lot of neuroscience, but it was definitely like really rigorous, and like reading research papers like it wasn't that great of an experience at the starting when you don't know what you're doing. But eventually I managed to like learn quite a bit about neuroscience and psychology through those methods, like mainly like talking to teachers, reading papers, and kind of looking through any kind of books I could find.
Yeah, so there you go, guys. You don't necessarily have to have, just because your school doesn't offer neuroscience or psychology courses does not mean that the door is completely closed for you. We've heard from our panelists, there's plenty of other ways to kind of explore your interests.
Moving on to the next question, this kind of goes hand in hand with the first one. And Mahiya, you can start us off with this. Why did you choose your current program of study?
Of course. So my current program, I'm doing my Bachelor of Science in Psychology. And I would say I had a very kind of organic path to choosing my current program. And by that, I mean, I really didn't plan to be in this modular study this subject, but I'm very, very glad to be here. So I actually began undergrad in medical sciences. I aim to do all of these things, a major and a minor, but a lot of that changed because a lot of the subject matter, it wasn't really what I anticipated it would be. And I really wanted to find an intersection between the academic material and my passions and my interests. So I switched faculties. First of all, I took some time off. I thought about it. And when I came back, I realized psychology, specifically cognitive psychology, would be very interesting. So cognition, you're focusing on how the brain creates and controls thought, language, problem solving, memory. So, and the psychological aspect of that would be basically the correlations between the brain and the mental state. So to be able to pursue that by doing psychology, but still being able to have my neuroscience and interests in the academic material, that's kind of how I really solidified and finally chose my program.
I think that's really reassuring for me, especially as a high schooler, and I'm sure for other students who feel like we have to have an exact plan and figure out exactly what we want to do when we're going into college, when we really have a lot of freedom and we can definitely take some time off and do a lot of exploring, and we don't have to really solidify what we actually want to do before we even get into college. And Michelle, you said that you did a lot of exploring earlier, like with robotics and development classes, but was there anything else that really pushed you into this career?
Yes, I was really interested in going into medical research labs. At Chicago, we have the East Campus and the West Campus, and I picked Chicago because my program was not only was it very small amount of students, but I had a very big range of research experimental that I could do myself. So they could give me my own lab and I could do different models, different things with doctors within West Campus. So I was planning to do either pre-med or stick with engineering and do neuroengineering. So I have a good blend with different subjects of the university, so different colleges. So the College of Engineering and the College of Medicine. And my program was a perfect blend of the both.
It's great. What about you, Jhillika?
So in India, there is a stereotype that when you study science subjects in your grades 11th and 12th, you're supposed to either pursue a career in medicine or engineering. I didn't want either. I was more inclined towards studying biology, but I was just not sure. I was just not sure about what I wanted to do in my life. But my breakthrough moment was the time, my eureka moment, I would say, was the time when I had the honor of interacting with the Nobel laureate in physiology and medicine, 1993, Professor Richard John Roberts. His words were very uplifting for me, because I was always fascinated by biology, but I just didn't know how to take it further because the road more traveled was medicine for us. And that was the only path that was being preached to us, that go make a career in medicine, crack the pre-med test and just get into a decent college. I mean, I really wanted to stay out of that rat race. I've never been of that. I've never really tried to, copy what others did. I wanted to do my own thing. So he told me, I asked him a question. So he told me, just never be afraid of what you want in life. And that's where it started. I mean, I wanted to do biology and I wanted to apply biology. I wanted to make people's lives easier. So biotechnology was the best thing I could get into. You're seeing its applications in agriculture, medicine, environment, industry. I mean, 21st century is seriously the age of biology. And I mean, in the coming decade, biotechnology can turn the world around. And the liveliest example is the COVID vaccine that we're all taking. I mean, a vaccine usually takes 5 years to, come into the markets and all, but it just took 1 year. I mean, this is the power of biotechnology. And I want to be a part of that revolution. We're being a small part of a big thing. So, I mean, after that conversation with Dr. Roberts, there was no looking back. And I was like, I want to do this. I just want to do this.
Wow, that's really inspiring how you just want to do what you want to do and you weren't like pressured by what others were doing around you. So thank you. What about you, Priyanshu?
Yeah, so for me, integrated sciences is a very it's a major that's very based on you. You pick a mentor, you get to choose your own courses, and you get to design your own syllabus. Like the point of this major is that you can kind of design your own course. And that was kind of basically you can design your own university program. You get into it in second year, and in second year, you spend your entire time first you find a mentor who will be basically specific to you. And then after that, you end up writing this career proposal and this entire proposal where you just write down these are the exact courses I want. This is why. This is how I think it will help my career passions. And this major was really interesting to me because honestly, I don't like school. So this major let me actually kind of detray a little bit away from the typical school stuff and focus more so on a lot of my research passions. Because for me, research and medicine and that kind of stuff was most interesting to me. So I've basically, this major allowed me the possibility of designing it based off of my research, which is right now I'm researching a lot of deep learning and linguistics kind of stuff. So I apply a lot of deep learning to neuroscience based measures, and that was what I was interested in. I originally wanted to do biology. I wasn't really sure how I would go about it. And I was I want to do biology. I want to do microbiome, that kind of stuff. And then I saw this major and I'm wait a second, this gives me the ability to do biology, but also do neurobi and also look at comp sci and also look at linguistics and philosophy and all that kind of stuff. And I chose it because of how interdisciplinary it was and how many different interests of mine I could accumulate. That's basically how.
Great. It's cool to see how many different topics and topics all of these kind of include. And I think a lot of people have this idea that when you go into something, you can only stick with one particular subject, but it really is interdisciplinary, and you can combine so many of your different interests in a single career. What about you, Vanessa?
So I think that when I was applying for university, I was kind of in a similar position to a lot of you guys, in which I just didn't know what I wanted to do. And I was actually debating maths and geography and neuroscience, and I really didn't know which one to pick. And kind of maths and geography both felt safer because they're so broad. And to me, neuroscience felt like it was a really narrow, specific thing to study. But now I find out it is not, and there is a huge amount that you can learn within it. But yeah, I'm not really sure what tipped me towards neuroscience out of all of them. I just kind of took a bit of a leap and went for it. And I'm really, really glad I did. It's great. But yeah, I chose Bristol because the first year of the study was joint between neuroscience, physiology, and pharmacology, which meant there was a little bit more leeway there in terms of not just straight neuroscience, but of course they all interact with each other. And also, I mean, with most universities, you do have the option of choosing other modules from other schools. So I did some biochemistry, I did some psychology, my friends did languages, and yeah, it was a good choice of program of study because it was specific enough to neuroscience and what I wanted to do, but within that, I could explore a little bit as well. Yeah.
Great, thank you. And finally, Chinmayi.
I echo a lot of what Priyanshu said, just in terms of the range of flexibility and being able to take individual courses and have your own sort of path. I think one of the neatest things about medical humanities is that there really are not two students in the program who have the same exact course of study. Some folks go the anthropology route, some folks go the neuro route, public health, ethics route. It's really individualized to what you want to do and what you want to focus your nexus on, quote unquote. So I think just having the opportunity to take courses in comparative literature on one hand and contrast that with Hispanic cultures and still see threads in neuroscience running throughout was a really big draw. The second part, I think, was that Columbia's institutions are really neatly situated close by, even in physical proximity in New York City. So while we undergrads are situated at the Morningside Heights campus, about 50 blocks uptown is the medical campus, with a lot of graduate schools nearby as well. So I personally am involved with some research at the medical campus. I have friends who are involved at the public health school, the graduate schools, business school. So there's really a lot of different interschool connections as well that I think set the tone for not only the people that you're meeting, but the kind of coursework and extracurricular opportunities that you're exposed to. And that was really a big plus point for me when determining the final decisions.
We can move on to the next question.
Okay, perfect. So I see that you all have different majors. Some of them are directly neuroscience related. Some of them may have some sprinkles of neuroscience through electives or concentrations. But I guess just to make it very clear, how does neuroscience relate to your field of study? Let's start with Michelle.
Okay. Hi. So I do a lot of signal processing. My neuroscience would be mostly understanding different parts of the brain and using different equipment from hospitals. We design different, we're just trying to design different tools for medical schools. So I get to explore a lot of different devices that we put on people, and we get to transfer that information and model it. And I get to try to understand how the brain works in that degree. So respect to human trials, we also do animal trials. We try to do VR trials. I do a lot of coding in data structures, a lot of CS programming, trying to make interfaces related to the brain. So picture this, medical students are relying on equipment that hasn't been updated for a while. And so my program and all my classmates were trying to upgrade all the devices for neuroscience.
Very cool. Let's hear from Chinmayi next. So you are also studying neuroscience with medical humanities. How do you kind of integrate them both into your degree?
The most straightforward route is hopefully imagining a career in, let's say, neurology or in some sort of a clinical route. I think it's just easiest to say, well, medical, neuroscience, neurology, neurosurgery, and go that route. I think the second avenue is, especially as someone who's really interested in science communication, I think medical humanities has kind of given me a 180 perspective on how exactly neuroscience travels from the lab to the clinical setting, to the general public, to policy and whatnot. So in that way, I think just the analytical skills themselves, thinking about ethics, autonomy for patients who have compromised states, especially when patients are unconscious, for instance, all those kinds of discussions, tracing back a bit of the history of the field, concerns with disparities, all of those, I would say, maybe even beyond taking the core biology classes that form the root of neuroscience in my nexus for medical humanities. It's also just the elevation of everything else that I would say goes beyond just neuroscience as a science, but what are kind of the applications in an everyday means, which I think is a really neat complement to just having research involvements that are very clinical heavy, and then having kind of degree coursework that is much more on the abstract end of analyzing real world things that maybe are a little bit more niche in the research avenue.
Priyanshu, why don't you tell us how you put the neuro in neurobiology?
Yeah, for me, for like a lot of my major, basically, it centers basically around understanding how biology works first. For example, studying a lot of the cells and studying a lot of like the chemical interactions that are happening. Regardless of the it's not necessarily in the brain, for instance. Like I study a lot of like the anatomy, a lot of the structures of cells, a lot of the gross anatomy, a lot of the microscopic anatomy, and then I apply it to neuroscience. So it's basically like, you know, I learn about like, oh, this is how a cell's junction works in the first place, and then I apply it to like neuroscience and get to like look at it that way. So like honestly, the study of neurobiology is oftentimes more so like studying what biology is first, then adding neuroscience on top of it, and it gives you kind of like an extra layer of depth. And for me, that's been always like, I think I've always loved biology. So being able to like implement into neuroscience has been really interesting. And my course, like my school offers like quite a few like anatomy courses, microscopic anatomy courses, but they don't offer many like biological neuroscience courses. It's more so like behavioral neuroscience, psychology kind of courses. So the route I've been going is like I've been studying a lot of what I study first is just the anatomy of the how like the human body works, and then I'll go off on my own and be able to study more about it. And then I will have some courses which are like specifically neurobio related, and I will be able to like develop my skills from there. And then I'm also able to like kind of like combine that with my research and kind of grow from there. So again, it's like this interdisciplinary aspect of like doing many different things that kind of gives me my major. But yeah.
Okay, very cool. So from one biology major to another biology enthusiast, Jhillika, do you want to tell us how neuroscience relates to biotechnology?
So my answer is pretty much similar to Priyanshu in terms of the basic study of biology, but coming to biotechnology, basically we took 1.5 years to basically understand the basic subjects that govern biotechnology, like cell biology, genetics, immunology, and stuff like that. So basically, these subjects really, uh, helps us to strengthen our concepts of biology, and then we can apply it to neuroscience, as Priyanshu said. And that gives an extra layer of depth. And talking about the applied aspects of neuroscience, biotechnology to neuroscience, basically you can study about drug discovery. There's a lot of research being done on neurological drugs, and concepts of drug discovery in biotechnology can give you an edge over other people. Also, when you're working on a specific protein, in molecular neuroscience or something like that, techniques of biotechnology actually help you. Like, if you're studying the chemoarchitecture of a particular part, then you need to do some in situ hybridization and immunohistochemistry. So we are extensively trained in these things while you're doing a degree in biotechnology. And the protein purification techniques, protein engineering techniques, and all, we're taught that quite extensively. And yeah, as I said about drug discovery and all, and also like stem cells, right, as in biotechnology has been quite a topic of interest. And many people in biotechnology are inclined to stem cells, and we have faculty electives and all, which like kind of are training us towards understanding stem cells and applying it to various neurological disorders, modeling neurological disorders through stem cells. I mean, it's very vast, and as we all know, neuroscience is very interdisciplinary. You can find neuroscience being connected to almost any discipline on this planet, I guess.
For sure, there's a lot of big words there. A lot to understand in a really cool growing field, which is biotechnology. But what about you, Mahiya? Do you want to tell us about how neuroscience relates to psychology?
Yeah, for sure. So I kind of touched on how neuroscience relates to psychology, as you're having to make a judgment and having a reaction about something based on the information you receive from your brain processes. And so neuroscience really allows for the understanding of these biological processes that underpin really any behavior, all behaviors. And that in turn allows for more informed decision with intervention and treatments. And so, yeah, that's kind of what I'm studying in school. And I also have the opportunity of working as a clinical research associate. And there I really get to integrate a lot of the psychosocial aspects with cognitive psych and neuropsychology. And so what I basically do is the studies we run there on patients with head and neck cancer, cancers related to the CNS, the central nervous system. But instead of focusing on the physical symptoms and treatments, we support that we support the humanistic aspects of cancer treatments to really help reduce the psychological burdens of patients. And so taking a neuropsychological lens there, it really helps to allow for a better understanding of how a patient has been affected cognitively and behaviorally by their diagnosis, and what we can really do to better support them and those in their lives and really improve that quality of life and the psychological aspects as well. So there, like it's been said, there are so many intersections of neuroscience to literally anything and everything, which again, make it so cool.
Yeah, 100% agreed with that one. And I think it's really important to kind of I think oftentimes people think neuroscience and psychology are the exact same thing. And there's definitely a lot of overlap, kind of answering the same questions, but from different lenses, like you were saying. Let's end off with Vanessa.
Sure. So, I mean, my degree was neuroscience, but the main field that I focused on was sleep. So sleep and neuroscience are actually really, really interconnected. I've done a project about how sleep and mental health are bidirectional with each other. So how your sleeping habits impact mental health and how mental health is affecting your sleep. So that's one way that the neuroscience is involved. And then also with sleep, I did my dissertation on how cognitive decline with old age is impacted by napping habits. So both normal cognitive decline kind of as we age, as you'd expect, but also when it's kind of a bit more than that, when you get into dementia and Alzheimer's disease. And so how your sleeping habits, both in the night and throughout the day, if you're napping, impact the long-term effects of your brain and the general neuroscience like that. But another way is, at the moment I'm doing an internship and we're looking at how REM sleep is involved in memory and reactivation of memories during REM sleep using cues that you've associated throughout the day. So yeah, there's loads of ways that the neuroscience relates to sleep and sleep relates to neuroscience. And I've been kind of just investigating as many routes through those as I can to find one that I want to focus in on for research eventually.
Very cool. So as you guys can see, there are various different pathways in neuroscience, different ways you can study it, different areas that you can concentrate on. And it seems to have an application to all the different fields that we discussed today.
So we've done a lot talking about these interests in the field. So let's get into the specific careers. So Jhillika, you can start us off. So you've explained how you're really, really passionate about biology, but do you want to get into what specific career you'd like to pursue in the future?
So I envision myself being a developmental neurobiologist because the field of development really intrigues me. Because I mean, you imagine, like, from being a single cell, we're like this totally fantastic creature, who's capable of doing anything and everything. Yeah, both the good and bad, but yeah, we are capable of doing anything with this brain. So I really want to know how this brain develops in the embryo. And also I'm interested in modeling neurological disorders using embryonic stem cells. I'm quite interested in that. And also I'm quite interested in social neuroscience, because I had my stint at Emory University as a summer undergraduate research fellow where I studied about the neural circuits underlying social recognition. And I was very intrigued by, social neuroscience. So I also would like to do that. So like kind of a bit confused as to what branch of neuroscience I'd like to go with, but yeah, developmental is the answer I would go for right now.
Great, great. It's great that you have so many different options because you're clearly interested in a lot of different fields. What about you, Vanessa?
So I think there are kind of two main career paths that I'm considering, and I really don't know at the moment which one I'll go for. So, I mean, the one I'm mostly on track for is to do a PhD and then go into research on sleep and how it affects us, and that, what I was kind of describing before. But the other one that I'm slightly looking towards now is working in the NHS, which is our National Health Service. I really like the idea of working for them. It provides free healthcare for everyone in the UK. So it's obviously like well loved here. And if I was to do that, I would work in the imaging department, so MRI, fMRI, EG, and mostly I'd be either working with patients that they need to find out what's happened in their brain, if they've had an accident, or if nothing's really happened specifically, but they're showing some kind of symptom and we need to find out what's causing that, or working with children when they're born or as they're aging and they're kind of showing signs that something might not quite be as it should be in the brain. I'd be imaging them and identifying what's going on, and talking with doctors and trying to decide what's the best course of action. So that's my other option, which I'm slightly more shifting towards at the moment.
Great. What about you, Mahiya?
Hi, so kind of similar to Vanessa, I think at least two career paths I'm hoping to pursue, and it'd be great if I could do both. One of them is, of course, getting my PhD. So getting my PhD and being able to further explore my research interests, but also I'm hoping to be able to do an MD PhD joint degree. And that's so I can then go into psychiatry and specialize in that field. And my interest specifically is providing mental health interventions for those who are incarcerated, and bringing a more humane approach there. So of course for that, I'll be working on like a research thesis and kind of seeing what I can do to go more into that and make my basically base my career off of that. So we're aiming to do a doctorate degree and a medical degree as well. So I'll see how that goes, but that's the plan for now that I hope to pursue.
Very cool. Thank you. And how about you, Chinmayi?
Yeah, it's still a lot of years ahead. I'm not entirely 100% sure, so we'll have to check back in like 5 years, but hopefully some mix of still being involved in research, maybe the clinical setting a bit, and outreach and communication. I definitely like that to be like a very integral part of my career, not just something that is outside of work hours. So I could definitely see myself working with like nonprofit organizations or even with like the public education branches of universities. And hopefully continuing with the traumatic brain injury interest line, pursuing an MD, maybe an MD PhD in that realm, and still like having a strong focus on clinical research would be really neat. Fingers crossed.
Wonderful. And what about you, Priyanshu?
Yes, I think my career path is like kind of in line with mine a little bit too, because I want to do a MD PhD. I want to go into like neurosurgery, but I also like that's kind of like my main path. I think of my career as more of a branching path rather than just simply like a straight line that I want to head to before I actually go to like neurosurgery. Like I want to end up in neurosurgery, but before I do that, I've been interested in a lot of like technological things. So right now I've been interested in a lot of software and deep learning kind of things. So right now I've been exploring a lot of research related to those two things, and I am like I want to explore a career in like software and deep learning and like kind of do more technological things, as well as doing a little bit of research. And then I want to go to med school and do a PhD, do an MD PhD. After that, I want to kind of do like neurosurgery. And then after that, like I still like want to go a little bit further beyond that. And after neurosurgery, I've been like one of the things that I'm most interested in is neurotech, which is like kind of this combination of neuroscience and technology, right? And like there's a lot of big companies like Neuralink which are trying to like which need neurosurgeons or which need like these people to help them actually kind of make all the devices work. So my goal is after I get all these credentials and after I'm able to actually kind of like do neurosurgery, after I'm able to understand this technology, I can combine the two and I can kind of, you know, pursue the passions for the rest of my life.
Sounds really interesting. And finally, let's hear from Michelle.
Hello. So my career would probably mostly be software and hardware engineering, medical device industry, private sector, and I would do a lot of research and development. I was debating whether to just after I finish my bachelor's to go with my master's. But now I figured that I will, right after graduation, I will go on within the private sector. And then if my employer wants me to get a master's, then they'll have to pay for it.
Definitely a lot of good ideas we heard today. I think one of the things that really stuck out to me is nobody said this is exactly what I'm going to do. And oftentimes as high school students, we think we need to have our entire 10 years planned out before we graduate high school. And as you guys can see, that's not the case. There are going to be lots of opportunities for us to figure things out during our undergraduate degrees. And I'm sure there are ways for you to incorporate your interests in various different ways. That being said, we are now going to move on to the open Q&A portion of our panel discussion today. So feel free to put some questions in the chat and we will read them out. We ask that you, if their question is specific to a certain panelist, if there's something they said that really stuck out to you, please just mention who it's for so that we can make sure your question gets the answer that you're looking for. Okay, so our first question says, what can I do in high school to get better in neuroscience? Are there any programs or organizations that are good to join? Chinmayi, I'm going to hand this one over to you.
Howdy. I would say, well, yeah, getting involved in neuroscience in high school. So some folks chose to go the route of volunteering with different organizations that are related to neuroscience education. Some folks actually decide to go more of a community-based approach, which I would also strongly encourage. For instance, tutoring for psychology, volunteering at a senior care center in your community where maybe some of the individuals there have dementia, I think is a really neat way to understand the lived experience of something that we're learning from in a textbook. Not a lot of people consider that to be like learning directly from neuroscience, but as a future neuroscience professional, it's super important that you see the other end of the table as well. That you understand the lived conditions of people that you might help in the future. So that's one avenue. Some people go to volunteer with hospitals if you're old enough. I think minimum is like 16 years. Let's see, other resources, definitely a lot of events that a lot of the big institutions and universities host. A little bit biased here, but I know Columbia, if you look up the Zuckerman Institute, there's a number of public events that they host online and hopefully starting this fall in person if you're in the New York City, Manhattan area. And a lot of universities also have that. I know Brown University has like the Carney Conversations, Lenox Hill neurosurgery department has like the Brain Turns summer virtual shadowing program that's really accessible. When you're in doubt, I would say Google is your best friend. You can never underestimate the power of just searching for high school summer research opportunities. So there's another question about research. And there's honestly a multitude that come up because SEO results are great like that. Instagram, and I would recommend even LinkedIn, Twitter, following along with big science communicators in the field. My gosh, what is the name of one? I know Science with Sam, I think, is a pretty big name in the field. Hope that's her right handle. But there's quite a few folks that amplify opportunities regularly on these platforms. So it's great to, one, hear about their career, and two, also follow along with opportunities in their niche that they share with students. Science Twitter and Neuro Twitter is becoming especially a really great hit for opportunities. Thing, yeah. You just got to keep up with the hashtags, #Neuro Twitter on Twitter. And there's plenty of folks who will post research assistant positions, events happening. There was like a neurosurgery boot camp recently by Duke Medicine that spotted on Twitter. So don't underestimate the power of social media even, and pivoting it towards your academic journey as well.
Yeah, lots of good information there from Chinmayi. Another question I saw in the chat is, how do you get involved with science-based research to begin with? Mahiya, do you want to take that one since you're working as a researcher?
Yes, for sure. So just getting involved, I think at a high school level, when you're thinking about a lab setting, there's one of the biggest learning curves that I had. Of course, I was out of high school during this, but when looking for any research opportunity, just getting familiarized with some of the technical aspects, such as scientific papers. And this could really also help you figure out what area specifically you'd like to explore as well, because in neuroscience, there are really, it's very interdisciplinary and there are so many topics, and so kind of narrowing that down to your specific areas of interest. Are you looking at autism, the autism spectrum? Are you looking at Alzheimer's, dementia? Is your interest in in cancer, I mean, kind of just specifying that. And then from there, once again, getting familiarized, reading those papers and kind of understanding what they're looking for in the language. Those will all be very great boosters. And sorry, I'm just reading the chat. Any neuro-related book recommendations? I don't know if that's a separate question or a part of this question as well, but once again, getting familiarized with the material, there is Oliver Sacks, and he is a great author, and he has written and explored so much of the brain. He was also a physician. So he has a lot of books such as The Man Who Mistook His Wife for a Hat, Musicophilia. And so those actually, when I was in high school, I was reading some of his work, and that really helped me figure out what the kind of route I wanted to pursue when I was going to look at neuroscience and get more involved in research paths as well. So really it's up to you, and it's kind of just knowing and figuring out where your interests lie and going from there.
Very cool. Does anyone else have any neuro-related book recommendations?
I think there's a book called The Brain by David Eagleman that is also a TV show. So you can read the chapter, and then also, and it like corresponds to a like one of the episodes. So if you don't understand it, he explains it, and you can see it visually as well. So that one I found really useful when I was in school.
Very cool. Another question that we get a lot is kind of, what's your advice for students who are applying to universities this year, especially with people who don't necessarily know what they want to study? Kind of what's your advice for them? Anyone feel free to take this question.
I can briefly start off maybe and just saying, pass it over to you really quickly, Mahi. Universities don't expect you to stick with the same major that you apply with. Like, let's just get that out of the way. I know some people who've applied with like a visual arts concentration, and now they're studying economics. Like, there's quite a wide range that you can explore. I think the most important part though is that you actually invest some time into researching what the programs are like at that university. Because I can say, for instance, I think UC Berkeley offers a cognitive science major, if I'm not remembering correctly. And Columbia, on the other hand, the neuroscience program is split half and half between the biology and the psychology departments. So it's really kind of a pick your own path and pick your own framework of approaching your degree, which even if you express that you're still exploring, colleges do still want to see that you exactly know what you're signing up for. So with that, I'll pass it over. Mahiya, I think you were about to talk.
Yes, absolutely. So Chinmayi had a lot of really, really important, great points. The main one being that it's very much okay to change your program and your major, and just kind of on that topic, just transitioning from high school to university and entering this very larger new world. It's important to have compassion for yourself. And I think that's something that high school we're just not told. So when so many things are changing, it's very, very normal to not perform exactly how you thought you would, or not have things go to plan. So it's absolutely okay to be kind to yourself and understand that you're trying your best, whatever that looks like for that time being. And another important thing is whatever module or course that you do finally stick with. I think most universities have something called a schematics that they have posted, and that's just every single year it tells you which courses and kind of what credits you need to fill. So kind of just having an idea of that throughout your years as well, even if you do switch programs. If you have that in mind, you kind of know the gaps that you have to fill. So you are still able to get your degree or multiple degrees in however many years you do choose to complete it. So that is important.
Okay, sounds good. Does anyone else have anything they want to kind of add on to that question or field of study?
I'd like to add about transition. Sometimes as undergrads, we feel very lost that what are we doing? Why are we doing this? So I'd just like to tell you guys that it's okay to not feel okay about what you're doing, because all of us are going through that. All of us are on the same page on this. And there is this very interesting phenomena I read. It's called the floating duck syndrome. It was discovered in a study conducted on Stanford students, I guess. So basically, it's like, you appear very calm on the exterior, but you are internally, you too are lost. You're like, you are having a hurricane of emotions. So this, I want you all to know that transition, it's not bad. Okay, people are starting their businesses at the age of 90, so you don't need to really feel bad about what you want in life, and just we don't just regret whatever choices you made in life. No matter how correct or wrong they were your choices. So you need to own yourself, you need to own your wounds, you need to own your challenges. So yeah, I mean, it's quite philosophical, but it really helps you. It really helps you to make peace with the fact that we can't know everything at the right time. We can't know everything. And you can take my case. I'm intending to transition to neuroscience in grad school while studying biotech in undergrad school. I mean, transition is daunting. But yeah, just don't fear it. Do what it takes, take that leap of faith. This is what my mom says. I'd like to tell this to you. I'm telling you. Change is not easy, but adapting to it would be.
That's great advice. Thank you, Jhillika. And with that, I believe we are at the end of today's panel discussion.
All right, so this concludes the speaking panel and the first day of the Cerebral Cortex camp. Thank you all so much for being such great participants and listeners, especially during this discussion. And of course, a huge special thank you to all of our panelists for your great insight during this past hour. This has really been informative for all of us, so thank you very much. For our camp participants, we hope to see you back tomorrow morning to begin working on your outcome projects. And if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to Gurleen, Divya, or me using these emails on the screen. Thank you again and have a great rest of your day.